Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that shocked everyone. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, the stories were true crime, history, and the paranormal meet. Now, who doesn't love a good ghost story, right? Welcome to Haunting History Podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and it's just me again this week for our opening. Coming up is the last part of our conversation with Orange County Sheriff Investigator Bob Taft. Looking back at the last year and a half, I would have originally thought that we would end up doing many more episodes to complete the story of Dorothy Jane Scott. During this last year, we visited the area where her remains were found off Santa Ana Canyon in Anaheim Hills twice. And I don't care what Haley and Bob said. It was like hiking, regardless of their opinion. We also visited the hospital where she disappeared, and during it all, we got to know her son, Shanti, or Sean as he goes by, and I feel like in a way we got to know Dorothy. No one deserves to go through what Dorothy went through, or what her parents, siblings, son, or friends have gone through in the years since. It's here that I want to remind people, it's not a crime to not report a crime, whether it happened 4 minutes ago or 40 plus years, like in the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. If you know something about a crime that's been committed, you won't be in trouble for coming forward now. Even if you worked at Swinger Psych Shop or Custom John's back in the day and thought something was weird or off that you never told anyone, it's okay to call now and tell what you know. You never know if your information is the piece that's missing that can help the investigator close a case and bring closure to a family that's been waiting decades for answers. In October, On the Case with Paula Zahn, a TV show, will be airing an episode we all participated on about Dorothy. They talked to Bob, Sean, Dorothy's brother, a crime blogger, and me, if I made the cut, I don't know. And even Pam Head, who was the last one to have seen Dorothy that night in 1980. You'll be able to find the episode on Discovery Plus. Up next is our part 3 of our conversation with investigator Bob Taft of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. How many people do you know the number of people that were talked to in regards to her case?
Dozens of people were.
And it would have happened when she went missing, and then again 4 years later after her body was found. And after her body was found, it moved from the UCI police to the Anaheim police. Now it's an Orange County Sheriff's case.
Yes.
Is that because it happened in an unincorporated area?
Well, actually, I'm not really sure why we took it over from Anaheim, because that technically is within the city of Anaheim's jurisdiction.
Right.
But I know there was a determination made at the time by the district attorney's office that the sheriff's department was going to take over jurisdiction.
Okay. So Dorothy was also found with, her remains were found with her watch and her turquoise ring.
Yes.
And you and I talked about this from literally back in April. Is there any chance that Sean is going to get the jewelry back, or is the sheriff going to hold on to that?
I can't say whether or not they're going to release it. Me personally, I don't think there's a need for us to hold on to it.
Okay.
Because there's really no evidentiary value to
That's
those
what I was
items.
going to say. There can't be at this point, right? There's no...
So if you're asking me personally, I don't have a problem with them returning those to her.
Is that something that you're going to work on, or you're going to
Yes.
ask? Okay, because I think that's important to
But
Sean.
I know part of it, usually with homicide investigations, we don't like to release anything.
Anything out of the file. 41 years later, though.
Correct.
41 years later, and probably... I mean, I'm not even saying probably. There's no evidentiary value to her watch and her ring.
Yes, and I think the only reason they collected them, obviously, at the time and
Because they were
didn't
on the
release
site.
them is because at the time she was unknown. She was a Jane Doe.
How long did it take for them to figure out it was her? Was it 2
I
weeks?
say it was
or
a month.
something? Oh, was it
Within
that
a
long?
month.
So her parents didn't know.
Because initially they didn't have dental records, so they had to track down dental records.
Okay, so her parents knew that they were trying to determine if it was her. So they had to wait a month to determine.
Yeah.
Because the
I don't
dad
even
mentioned
think
that
they-
it was a relief.
Yeah, I don't recall if they even brought it to her folks' attention.
Well, for
that
the dental records, they probably
could
would
have possibly
had to.
been her.
At least
So-
find out her dental records, right?
Have we talked about the distance between UCI to where she was found? It's close-ish, but it's not that close.
It's not okay. So the distance from the hospital to where her car was found was 13 miles. The distance from her car to where her body was found was 22 miles.
20 something.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was kind of a big diamond.
Yes.
Basically, it's like a triangle. It is a triangle, right? UCI's here, the car was over here and then her body was found here.
Right.
That's weird. Now, you said they spoke to dozens of people. There was not a real suspect, but one of the persons of interest was a man named Mike Butler.
Yes.
Mike Butler. Now, you have listened. There's recordings of his initial interview, correct?
Yes.
What is your general... And before I kind of like release this big, huge news that nobody's ever had, listening to Mike Butler, the police never arrested him. They never had evidence that he actually... But when you go on any of the websites, any of the Reddits, or listen to any podcast, everybody seems to think that Mike Butler, because he was a quirky guy. Is that the way you would describe him?
Yes.
He's kind of off. He was kind of different.
I would say he's a little bit different. And in listening to the interviews, he talked a little bit slow, but maybe that was just the type of person that he was. Not slow mentally wise, but slow tempo wise.
He definitely, like from the stuff that I've read, and I'm curious about your opinion, he didn't mind the attention he was getting for these interviews and things like that. Like, it was kind of like an excitement in his life. And I think that happens with a lot of people.
It could have been. I know in the interview that I listened to, he didn't seem overly excited during that interview. He was just
But he was more than willing to answer any questions.
Yes,
The whole
absolutely.
entire time. Now, was he their number one person of interest back then?
I wouldn't say there was a number one person of interest,
Okay.
but I know the initial UCI investigators did conduct an interview with him.
Okay. Just UCI, did Anaheim ever go back and talk to him?
I don't believe so. I think UCI was the only one that ever interviewed
What about
him.
the Orange County Sheriff? Never spoke to him after her body was found?
They did, but he was living in Washington at the time.
By then.
So it was remote. It was
Okay.
a remote interview.
So the one thing that no one knows when they talk about it on all the different sites is, and people assume that Mike Butler loved Dorothy from afar, but that's not far. That's the farthest from the truth. He was in her inner circle.
Yes, they were
and
friends.
They actually spoke about getting married at one point.
Correct.
And I'm going through Sean, when one of the times that we met with him, brought his baby book, and Dorothy sweetly wrote notes about every single thing in Sean's life for that first 4 years. And this is where a lot of people talk about her being a Christian. And she did become sort of a born-again Christian with her brother. And she even wrote, like, in the baby book, like, for his first birthday, that Jesus was at his party. Mike Butler is all over that book. People portray him as being someone outside her circle because people clinch the fact that, it's Mike Butler who did it because he worked as a mechanic really close to where the stores were.
Yes.
And his sister worked with Dorothy.
Yes.
So everybody surmises that, Mike Butler would have had the information about Conrad going to the hospital and the information about her scarf because his sister worked with her and would have been at that meeting that night. But no one understands that Mike Butler was a huge part of Dorothy's life.
Correct.
Literally to the point that they discussed getting married.
Yes. And they were, I think that it was Mike's initiative that got Dorothy into religion. So
I thought it was her brother.
That
So
was
it was
their
Mike?
common theme, that they were both very religious. And I know Mike was not happy about her working at the head shop due to the nature of the business and their Christian beliefs.
Really, and people talk about Mike being part of the occult, that he had a different religion aside from Christian. That's not true.
None of that is documented in anything that
So
I've
he
seen.
was like sort of okay.
Did Mike know about the phone calls before she went missing?
He didn't. They were very close. They were together a lot. So I can't imagine that she wouldn't have told Mike about the phone calls.
Correct. And she knew
Did he
Mike
say
from
that
the
in
time that she moved to California from
For
Missouri.
years, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they knew each other for several years.
And he was at all the family functions. And this is the thing that I want everyone to really think about, that have heard other stories about this, is there is no way that Vera, Jacob, or Dorothy would not have recognized Mike's voice. It's just not possible. So then we can go back to the theory that the person calling really had nothing to do with her disappearance, which to me is weird because he literally was telling her he was going to do what ended up happening to her.
Yes.
So either that person is not the same person, but it really does not pinpoint that Mike is the one who did this to her. Was Mike, during the interviews, was he devastated about what happened with Dorothy, or was he more matter-of-fact about it?
He was more matter-of-fact about it.
Is that weird?
But I don't know if that was just his personality or because some people are not very emotional no matter what the circumstances are.
What was your inner instinct when you were listening to him? Is this the guy?
I did not get that impression, no.
Okay, and clearly the police didn't back then either.
No.
And his sister has maintained his innocence for 41 years. His sister was a famous singer, and I'm not gonna put her on blast. I don't know if other people have done it or not, but she's a Google search away. She was very famous, and that was the environment that Dorothy was in, the whole music
Correct.
environment.
That's what initially brought her to California.
From
Missouri.
The other suspect that people bring up is Sean's biological dad, but his biological dad was not even in the state that night.
No.
That day. Okay, so like
There's no indication that he was here. He was here a couple weeks prior, visiting
Sean.
And all the interviews said that they drove him to the bus stop. He got on the bus and left, and he also had a receipt for a bus ticket.
And Dorothy's dad said he called him at home that night, or that next day. Called him, and he was at home in Missouri. So he was not a suspect.
No.
At all. Like, he was pretty much eliminated pretty quickly.
He was not the focus of the investigation. You never want to say that, somebody's never a suspect, but he was not the focus of the investigation.
So who else was a focus besides Mike Butler?
That was pretty much it. They really didn't have a lot of good investigative leads.
Okay, so now here's my big thing, because and this has only come up since we've got to know Sean more. And one of the things about Mike Butler is that he lived in the San Diego Hills, which technically are not far from Santa Ana Canyon. So that was like a big thing that people always pinpoint for Mike Butler.
Yes.
Is that he would have had access to information about the hospital, would have had access to information about what she was wearing that night, and he would have, the drive from San Diego Canyon to Santa Ana Canyon was not a significant drive. It was all rural driving. There are other people that in Dorothy's life that through you taking over the case, that you found out through there are people in Dorothy's life that actually were never interviewed back in 1980 or 1984.
Yes.
So there are people that you're still interested in speaking with.
Correct.
I find it so odd that a woman goes missing from a hospital, like an emergency room hospital. Her car is found in a public place burning. Her body is found on the road, and there's no person of interest except for the one that no one ever publicized was a close personal friend of hers. And
yes.
The police obviously knew that Mike Butler and Dorothy were very close. And maybe that's why to them, like, he was a person of interest, but he was never a suspect, because it just doesn't make sense. He truly did love Dot.
Yes, he did.
And so do you find it weird now? Is it different now than it was back in 1984? Would you have more people to pull from now, do you think?
Well,
like phone records, groups that she belonged to?
The technology nowadays is exponentially different than it was back then. There are numerous additional resources we have available now that didn't even exist back then.
Like cell phones, like where her car had been, where she had
social media. Obviously people are aware that they can track cell phone locations.
I mean, you can track my car now. Like, I park somewhere and walk away from my car, and 5 minutes later I get a notification about where exactly my car is parked.
Yes. So the technology is non-comprehensible what we can do now compared to what was available back then. So for me to look at it through 2021 investigator eyes is different than looking at it through either 1980 or 1984 investigators' eyes.
But basically, her case isn't closed.
Her case is not closed.
On a scale of, a scale of 1 to 10, her case is still 50-50 solvable, correct?
Well, maybe I'm optimistic, but I think that every unsolved case is solvable.
But there's no DNA in this case. Like, a lot of cold cases are now being
focused on DNA. Yeah.
Right. That's not an option with Dorothy's case.
Because her remains were
2 years old or older.
Yeah, well, 4 years old.
We just never determined for sure that her body could have ended up there that same night before they even found her car, or it could have been 2 years later. We don't know.
We don't know.
We just kind of hope it was probably that night.
Yes.
And she did not suffer more than she did. I mean, the fear must have been so real. And it's funny because, I keep saying how I don't have theories, and I have so many theories on this case, is that I feel like whoever abducted her from the parking lot that night was someone, she knew, and someone who probably told her something happened to Sean. Like, I got to get you home. Like, I don't see Dorothy leaving her friends there.
Yeah, well, unless it was some sort of true abduction.
Unless it was someone who grabbed her, threw her in the car, and
Correct.
drove away. And
Because, yes, it seems for you and I, if I'm there supposedly to take care of somebody and take them home, I'm just going to hop in my car and drive away for whatever reason.
yeah, even if your son
it was,
right.
Yeah, she would swing by, pick them up, like, hey, get in, I got to go.
Yeah.
Especially
So-
if they saw her drive past them,
Yes.
she could have easily just stopped on the corner and said, "Get in, we have to
both
go."
Pam and Conrad said, hey, we tried to flag her down.
Yeah.
And she was not stopping, or whoever was in the car was
Okay.
not stopping.
Now, on the episode that we did again, we will be on a TV show on Investigation Discovery. I think it's Investigation Discovery, called On the Case with Paula Zahn. They contacted you originally
Correct.
because they came across the case.
Yes.
And they decided to include all of us. I still don't know why they're going to include they told me numerous times they've never had a podcaster on. They've had reporters and stuff like that, but this is the first time they've had a podcaster. So I will end up in about 3 seconds of it. I think I said maybe 2 lines that were worthy of being aired. You will be on it for the entire time, and all those things that we've covered in this episode is going to be covered on the show. Is
Yes.
it pretty much the same? Is there-
I'm assuming so. We talked about briefly, like, we don't know what they're
actually
going
going
to
to
do.
air.
Yes.
They did get to speak to Pam. Who else was in the show? Her, Dorothy's brother Jim is
Yes.
on the episode because we met him that day when we went to film, and Sean is going to be in the episode, which is amazing. And I don't know if Sean initially, when we first started talking about this case back in April, the podcast I was gonna do an interview with you, and then in conversation with Sean and a conversation with a crime blogger. I don't know if that's gonna happen now. I don't, and it's fine either way. We went through that whole TV show thing. Like, we all met in that hotel and went through a lot of Dorothy's stuff, and then Sean and I had taken the crime blogger to where her remains were found. So I don't know that we're gonna carry this episode into talking to Sean. I would love for him to convey how he's felt for the last 41 years. But I think this whole thing has been very hard on him. I think
Absolutely.
even
I couldn't put myself in his shoes whatsoever.
no, and he's just the kindest man. He's just really. I don't think that he's had an easy life. He was raised by his grandparents, and probably lived in the shadow of his mom. His grandparents loved his mom dearly, and his uncle. Like, she had siblings too, so he grew up with all these people that knew his mom, and he was only 4.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically grew up with an impression of his mom, not necessarily a memory of his mom. And I can't imagine that's easy for anybody. And he has a few times struggled having this conversation. And when I initially talked to him, I had said that my biggest thing is I wanted to talk to you because I wanted to get her jewelry for his daughters. He has daughters too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if he'll do an episode with me at this point. I think that had we recorded this 7 months ago,
Correct.
he would have done it. But I think after going through the TV show and stuff, it's bringing up memories and things that maybe you don't want in your face every single day. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
I mean, I will definitely do a show with him if he chooses to, but it's not something that I'm going to pursue to do with him. Overall, looking at this case, not having the genetic or the DNA, there's still a chance that Dorothy's case could be solved.
Well, like I said, I'm the perpetual optimist. I hope that every case that I look at could be solved.
Can you tell us if you have information? Is this case one of those cases, and I don't know if you can, and it's fine if you just tell me no comment. Is this case one of those cases where you have information that if you were contacted by someone with evidence or information or even just thoughts, is there information that the sheriff's department has that nobody else has that would confirm yes or no if the murder came forward or if you figured out who it was?
I can't comment on that.
You can't say that.
No, because like I said, there's things regarding investigations, like we talked about, that only only the
certain
killer
people.
would know.
Right.
So if I say, yeah, we're looking for this, then
No, I mean, I don't want to
obviously-
know what it is, but is there something? Are you allowed to tell me whether there is some?
Well,
mapping or
sometimes
just
you don't
no comment
know.
in general?
You don't know what it is until you hear it.
Okay.
So
So it's not like there's like one smoking gun where you're like, yep, we got him.
correct.
Like,
Well, I don't think there ever is. I don't think
You
there's
don't think
ever
so?
a single, unless you find the gun or the bullet or something
right. That forensically attaches
matches,
them.
then
Okay.
yes. So
And we don't even know what her cause of death was.
no.
There was no way to tell from
Nope.
her bones.
Has anyone, if it's even worth it, has anyone now thought about going back to where her body was found to do more digging
Forensic
for her
stuff,
more,
They
more
have not.
bones?
They haven't.
Would
I-
there
I
even
know
They did extensive back when her
Anaheim
bones
did
were
a
found.
pretty extensive search at the time, and they had search crews out there over the course of a week on multiple occasions looking for additional items, and
They've never found anything
they've never
else.
found anything other than what was initially collected.
I know that in one of the articles, they had said they had brought the explorers out into
Correct.
the line walk where they literally walked from like the road way past 30 feet to determine if any other bones were found or anything other information was found. And her ring and watch were just found in the area too.
Yes.
And her mom identified that as hers.
Yes.
Like we know that was hers. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that this person of interest, Mike Butler, he actually died in 2014. So he's not even alive anymore.
Correct.
But his sister is still alive, and he has maintained his innocence for the last 40, until he died. He has people in his life when he moved up to Washington that speak very highly of him. He was never in trouble with the law and never did anything like he, as far as a viable suspect, like, I guess that was my last question to you, is that someone who did this to Dorothy, is it typically something someone does one time?
You never know. I don't think you can pigeonhole
That person
That-
to one thing.
to
'Cause
one
it just
thing
depends
because,
on why or what.
It depends on the circumstances. If it's a passion killing, then yeah, that may be a single one and they never do anything again. Obviously, you have serial killers out there. You have people that abduct people for sexual gratification. So you just never know.
And Dorothy's never been looked at as a serial killer victim. Or was that something that they all looked at? I mean, there were serial killers all over the place in the 80s. Like, California was literally brimming with
There
them.
was. And unfortunately, because a lot of these cases run together in my mind, I don't know if she was specifically looked at with regards to
Any particular
any
serial
serial
killer.
killers.
And the phone calls are kind of throw that off a little bit too, isn't it? 'Cause
Yes.
has there ever been an FBI profile on the person who did this too?
No.
Do you think that's something that you would do now?
I know I've tried it. I tried it on Carrie's case, and unfortunately,
There's just not enough information.
they're way overtaxed. So I think they focus more on current
More current
investigations
cases.
than past investigations. So
Okay. Are there more cold cases you want to do together?
there's always more cold cases I want to do.
You do.
So yes,
So you'll come back after we see if we get this one approved.
absolutely.
Okay. You're not going to stop talking to me anyways, are you?
No.
Okay. The case of Dorothy Jane Scott isn't closed. Her parents died in 1994 and 2002, not knowing what happened to their daughter. I hope her son doesn't suffer that same fate. Sean and his daughters, Dot's grandchildren, and her brother are all victims too. Someone out there knows or suspects what happened to Dot that night in 1980. Your information can help a family to get the answers they deserve. If you know anything about the disappearance and murder of Dorothy Jane Scott, please call the Orange County Sheriff's Department at 714-647-7055. Thank you for listening to this episode of Haunting History Podcast. We love hearing from you, so be sure to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to all your favorites.
Visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com for more information on each episode, links to our Patreon page, and all of our social media platforms.
Until next time, I'm Kat.
I'm Haley.
Remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.